the Portuguese government, so now we are continuing routes, explorations, and commemorations. The Portuguese government erected two navigational beacons, Diaz Cross and Da Gama Cross, to commemorate Bartolomeu Diaz and Vasco da Gama, who were the first modern European explorers to reach the Cape. When lined up, these crosses point to Little Rock, a large, permanently submerged shipping hazard in False Bay. Okay, now this thing of naming again, it continues. It continues honoring Diaz, honoring Vasco da Gama. And for a lot of the descendants of the white settlers in this country, these are heroes. For a lot of them, these are heroes and will forever be heroes, including Jan van Riebeeck, who comes later in the story. But these are their heroes. And you see, this is where now, again, differences in view. I cannot celebrate the heroes of colonialism, the champions of colonialism, apartheid, and why would you understand? Why would those be heroes for me? I mean, their impact on this landscape has been absolutely devastating. Why would I why would I celebrate these people? All of them, from the colonial to the apartheid. But those are the heroes for a lot of white South Africans, and they remain their heroes. Even those who committed atrocities will remain their heroes. You see, and I get it for them, but for me, absolutely not. Those are not my heroes. Never be. And I could never celebrate them or participate in any activity celebrating them. I won't. Absolutely won't. I'll celebrate Steve Biko for sacrificing his life so that my life as a Black person can be given some kind of recognition and value. That, hey, I'm also a human being. I'll celebrate him because of that and paying the ultimate price to ensure that at least partially we have what we have now. So yeah, that's my position on that. Contemporary, the Cape of Good Hope saw an increase of ship activity after the 2021 Suez Canal obstruction and the 2024 Red Sea crisis, with ships needing a different route from the Indian Ocean. The Cape of Good Hope route took a toll on the sea freight industry, stretching the transit time, reducing carriers' availability. So there was a lot of pressure placed on the Cape because of what's happening in the Middle East. It became difficult to navigate the water in the Middle East. Do you see these are the strategic things you must think about when you're thinking about Africa, when you're thinking about the Middle East, all these regions, when you're thinking about China, all the hotspots where there is contestation, you must think about it. There's an impact in everything, that goes on in the world. And that's why I take an interest in what happens globally, because it's going to affect the price of bread here, So that's very important. The Cape of, we've talked about that. Carriers' attempts to resort to Red Sea route come at the expense of vessels and seafarers' safety, as the Red Sea witnessed multiple sunken carriers struck by the Houthi movement. So the Houthi movement, those are other people who are fighting, against Israel and the West and America and all of them. Many huge shipping companies and industries were affected by the situation, such as IKEA, Amazon. So do you see that the United States of America, their military action anywhere always goes with the money. Because you see, now it's hard for them to move in the Middle East because these guys are fighting with them. So now they need to find a way to get rid of these guys so that they can have, free access again to those water bodies. So you see, if anything, this recording has to help you understand that it's all about the money, and that any political discourse that does not include the money is empty. Just talking about, oh, yeah, so and so is corrupt, yeah, this and that. Let's talk about the money, though. How it's working, who's making it here and how they're making it. Let's talk about the money. You see, once you start talking about the money, people get upset once you start talking about the money. People get upset, man, because you're tampering with their interests. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope my signal is not terrible. Just realized maybe connected to the wrong router, but hey, I hope it didn't negatively affect my recording too much. But yeah, it's such an interesting thing when you read this history and you see how all of these things intersect, and I think, just to make my point a bit more crystal clear, before we go into the history of African nationalism and whatnot, I think I'm going to be doing a lot of these episodes in the coming weeks. But there are certain things I want us to cover and certain things I really have to make sure I say in this particular episode. But yeah. So now I've spoken about all these interests, all these different interests in Africa and the Middle East and whatnot. What is it about, really? Is it about the United States of America championing democracy and freedom across the world? Let us investigate this idea for a second. Now I'm going to show you a document of the United States government. And this nicely outlines what the U.S. interests are. And they say the U.S. interests. What are they? Let me share this document with you. Telling you, brothers and sisters, it's hectic. It's hectic. Yeah, for these episodes, you are going to need a lot of your mental faculty to keep up. It's a lot of information, no doubt. Okay, this is not. There it is. So, this document, it is Supreme Court case number 00-9587, National Security Council Memorandum 46, March 17, 1978. Presidential Review Memorandum to the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Director of Central Intelligence. The subject, Black Africa and the U.S. Black Movement. I want us to think about this. You remember a while back, and I'm also bringing this so that I can show you receipts, that I don't just make wild claims here about the United States of America. I had mentioned previously when I was addressing this issue of the petty squabbles between Africans between South Africans and Nigerians, between Africans on the continent and Africans in the US, Africans in the Caribbean. Hey, we are just fighting over nonsense. But we don't understand that this may well be engineered and manufactured by those who exploit us, because that is the best way they can maintain their exploitation of us. But everyone thinks they have the right to be angry. The South Africans believe they have the right to be angry with the Nigerians and the Zimbabweans and and a lot of the other groups. And then, the other groups are angry with the South Africans, and everyone feels justified in their anger. What are we doing with all this emotional stuff? I mean, I know that there are some issues that are serious that need to be addressed and so on. But in the bigger scheme of things, we are doing nothing. We are really just acting against our own interests in the geopolitical context. That's it. It doesn't, I know it won't land right on the ears of some of my people, but that's what we're essentially doing. We're just wasting our own time and acting in the interests of our enemies. Those who hate to see our true progress, they celebrate at this kind of stuff. So listen to what they say. This diaspora beef that keeps going on, especially with Africans on the continent and Africans in the US. This diaspora beef, you guys think you are so smart, you're so clear. No, Uncle Sam has outsmarted you. Uncle Sam has outsmarted. Listen to this. The president has directed that a comprehensive review, okay, a comprehensive review be made of current developments in Black Africa from the point of view of their possible impacts on the Black movement in the United States. Let's think about this for a moment. The opening line in the memo, the president has directed that a comprehensive review be made of current developments in Black Africa. Very specific, from the point of view of the possible impacts on the Black movement in the United States. What things should this review consider? The review should consider long-term tendencies of social and political developments and the degree to which they are consistent with or contradict the US interests. I wonder what those interests are. So they are worried about collaboration between Africans on the continent and Africans in the US. And they are asking themselves, what are the interests? Which of our interests does this impact? This is geopolitical science, ladies and gentlemen. This is how it works. These are the questions that the US government is asking itself. They are thinking about what it means for Africans on the continent. Nina, you are still going to suffer, Africans, if you don't get this thing. You're still going to suffer if you don't understand this thing. Proposals for durable contact between radical African leaders and leftist leaders of the US Black community. These are the actors that are being identified as being problematic. These are the actors. So this is during the time of these revolutions and so on. Since the 1970s, going on the 80s. Appropriate steps to be taken inside and outside the country in order to inhibit any pressure by radical African leaders and organizations on the US Black community. For the latter being the Black community in the US, to exert influence on the policy of the administration towards Africa. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. The president has directed that the NSC Interdepartmental Group for Africa perform this review. They have an interdepartmental group on you. The review should be forwarded to the NSC Political Analysis Committee by April 20. They've got political analysis committees, interdepartmental group for Africa to look for anything that is consistent with or contradicts the U.S. interests. What are those U.S. interests? We're going to hear. Right, so this is the first part of the document, signed the new Brzezinski, can't read that name properly. The Secretary of the Treasury is on CC. The Secretary of Commerce, the Attorney General, the Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff. Guys, all of this concerned about what you're doing. You, the Africans on the continent and Africans in the US. All these people, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Director of Central Intelligence, on CC, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Commerce, Attorney General, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff. Serious, this is serious business, Africans. Now, here comes the response to that memo. National Security Council Interdepartmental Group for Africa. Do you remember these folks who have been tasked with working on this particular project? Study response to Presidential Security Review Memorandum NSC 46, Black Africa and the US Black Movement. Now, let's find out what those interests are. Objective of our policy towards Black Africa is to prevent social upheavals, which could radically change the political situation throughout the area. The success or failure of our policy in the region depends on the solution international and internal issues whose importance of the United States is on the increase. U.S. interests in Black Africa. A multiplicity of interests influences the U.S. attitude toward Black Africa. The most important of these interests can be summarized as follows. Political. 1. If Black African states assume attitudes hostile to the U.S. national interest, our policy towards the white regimes, which is a key element in our relations with the Black states. Now remember, South Africa is still under apartheid at this time when they are talking these things. So when they say, if Black African states assume attitudes hostile to the U.S. national interest, our policy toward the white regimes, because the U.S. supported apartheid, which is a key element in our relations with the Black states, may be subjected by the latter to great pressure for fundamental change. This is what they don't want. Fundamental change which would ultimately benefit you as Africans. They don't want that. So what are these interests? What are their interests in Africa then? If they don't want fundamental change for your development, why are they here? Thus, the West may face a real danger of being deprived of access to the enormous raw materials, enormous raw material resources of Southern Africa. I want to tie all of this together, guys. They are talking about Black Africa, but one of their biggest concerns is Southern Africa because of the enormous raw material resources, which are vital for our defense needs, as well as losing control over the Cape Sea routes, by which approximately 65% of Middle Eastern oil is supplied to Western Europe. I mean, yo, this is why the US is interested in South Africa. And this is why South Africa is so important in Africa and in SADC, or Southern Africa. The enormous raw material resources. Guys, it's all about the money. Let's not waste our time on the political theater. It is about the money. Follow the money. They are afraid to lose control of the Cape Sea routes. The Cape of Good Hope. You remember that? So do you see what this is really what it was about historically and what it is still about, what it remains about? It's not about whether or not people are voting every 5 years. It's not about whether or not you have the freedom, to do whatever. It's largely about who controls the resources and what is their attitude towards American interests, European interests. Moreover, let's continue. Moreover, such a development may bring about internal political difficulties by intensifying the activity of the Black movement in the United States itself. So if these Africans on the continent, seize control of their territories and become truly independent, that could also create a problem for us with the Black American community. These are the matters that heads of state and this is real politics. Now these are real things of politics, not the speeches on TV. These are the real things. It should also be borne in mind that Black Africa is an integral part of a continent where tribal and regional discourse, economic backwardness, inadequate infrastructure, drought and famine are constant features of the scene. In conjunction with the artificial borders imposed by the former colonial powers, guerrilla warfare in Rhodesia, and widespread indignation against apartheid in South Africa, the above factors provide the communist state with ample opportunities for furthering their aims. This must necessarily redound to the detriment of US political interests. And that's why around that time, there was such a hoo-ha around being a communist. Being a communist was the worst thing you could be labeled as. That's why Lumumba ended up being killed, not because he was a communist, but because they labeled him as such. And so they created this scare around communism and communist ideas. And they fought against anyone who was trying to advance that, because that is a counter now to the expansion of European capitalist interests. You understand? The capitalist interests of the West, Western Europe in particular, because they were fighting with the Russians in Eastern Europe. So they were never on the same page with those guys. So yeah, I mean, just on that alone, they already expressed to you. I mean, they're talking about their interests in our region. The first thing they're talking about is not democracy, liberty for the people, prosperity. No, they say we are concerned about losing access to enormous raw material resources and losing trade routes. And what do they think could possibly cause this? Pan-Africanism. They don't say Pan-Africanism. They just say the interaction between Black Africa and Black community in the United States. But that's really what we call Pan-Africanism. So imagine how they feel about the potential unity of Africans globally. All of us on the same page globally. Scary, scary prospect. Let me stop here for now. I think Um, there is so much more still to cover on this subject. But my fellow Africans, especially those in this country, we need to start thinking about this a bit differently. You know, there's a lot to think about. This is Geopolitics 101. These are the things we need to be thinking about and asking questions about. Um, and next time, I'm going to start talking about African nationalism because you must remember the things I've mentioned because all of this is going to tie in together, and you are going to understand Orania, Cape Independence, all these things, the DA's political positionality, the alignment with the West. The DA is here to make sure the US interests are protected in the interests of Europe. And that's why they will fight against any kind of policy that threatens that. That's what they are here to do. And that's why you see whenever they feel like they have a problem, where do they run to? United States of America. And Ernest Roots, is it? Of the African Forum, he was all over, uh, I think, Europe and America, meeting up with other right-wing leaders there and other conservatives, you know, to to say, look, guys, we are Westerners like you. We feel like you've abandoned us. We see ourselves as Westerners, as part of you. And that's why these ones of Cape Independence are talking about establishing a state based on Western values. And if they manage to convince the international community and if they manage to convince the world and the international community, the UN, to grant them that sort of sovereignty, as they call it, self-determination, whatever. If they get that, guys, they are saying that we are going to be promoting and furthering Western values, in other words, Western interests and so on. And so they can get that support very easily, especially with the United States now in dire situation geopolitically. So, yeah, very, very problematic, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very problematic. But think about that. If they want to establish an Israel like state, in a state where brown people are treated as second class citizens and pretty much live under apartheid conditions. Nina, you Africans were pushing for this Cape independence. What what do you imagine your life is going to be like in that Israel like state with Western values? Hmm? Guys, I'll never support any. I'm not going to support any. And that's why even with the ANC, look, man, in terms of the ANC, there's a certain level of sort of sympathy I have for their situation. But I'll never support them as long as they're on this neoliberal, market oriented political posture, always serving the interests of the market, the expense of our people. As long as our people, the majority, the 80% black majority in this country are poor, then the ANC can expect support from me. After years of governance and the material condition of my people has not significantly changed, I can support that. So that's it for now, brothers and sisters. Um, yeah, I can't support any position that is anti my people. We'll continue this conversation, brothers and sisters. See you soon.